I'm the founding teacher at InsightLA here, and really happy to be back with you today. Happy Easter, everybody. End of Passover, Easter. The Indian holiday of Holi was last weekend. This is just the time of spring festivals. So this morning, I just encourage you can just scroll through the pages and see who's here. I'm grateful to Elisa last week, who gave a beautiful talk. I listened to her talk. It was just beautiful. And if you didn't listen to it, you still can. You know, it's all the talks are always up on the InsightLA YouTube. And thanks to Jim for that. And so you can listen and you can hear the questions and reflections and the talk. And yes, Elisa is awesome. And we waited 4 years to have her come back because she was in the Spirit Rock Teachers of Color. And there were a couple of queer identified people in that group as well for 4 years. So it's just kind of a beautiful circle that she came back to teach last week. And for those of you who may be new, what we do is we sit for half an hour, we have some teaching, and then a chance to have some conversation with each other. And so we'll begin by sitting, and I might offer a few reflections as we sit. We'll sit in silence today. I'm not going to do the traditional, I change it every week, but our guided meditation. I mean, I always leave lots of silence, and I see that my old friend Joshi is here, and as a Zen student for, I don't know, 15 years anyway, we never had any guided meditations. And as I like to say, I'm personally not very fond of them because they interrupted my thinking. And so, but today we will, I'll just drop in some reflections and contemplations. The Buddhist texts are filled with reflections and contemplations. It's not all just, totally silent sitting. And, you can ignore them or pick them up and reflect a little bit. And what it means to have a reflection or a contemplation when you're sitting is you sort of drop that question into your mind, into your heart, and just see what arises. It's not something you have to think about in any linear way. And so please, don't, if you can help yourself, which we usually can't. So let's sit together, and then we'll have a chance for some teaching and talking, and find a posture that you can sit comfortably in for this time. And it's fine to move if you need to, but it's also good to practice sitting with a little bit of discomfort when it arises, because we know that the pathways in the brain that process discomfort and pain physically are the same pathways that process, emotional pain. And so when we strengthen, in one area, we're actually strengthening our capacity to be with experience of all kinds in the other. And I just want to also thank our moderator, Alex, this morning. Thank you. Hi. And let's sit together. And so as we sit together, just feeling that sense of being, of moving gently, being led gently from one moment to another. Just feeling the aliveness of being here. Of still being here. And of being still here. And sitting and breathing, perhaps sensing the heartbeat. If you feel drawn to a contemplation, you can imagine yourself planting a seed with each breath, a seed of renewal. And maybe taking a few moments to just imagine what renewal looks like. What might this look like in you? And noticing the moments where you feel some peace or confidence in your own being. Maybe watering those moments with your attention. Mindful of a sense of, peace, trust. The sense of just being enough. And if you feel like it, just to reflect on what being enough means to you, looks like for you. Trusting that this moment is enough. That whatever is happening, whatever this moment holds and contains, is awakening. Right here, right now. And maybe there's some noticing that moment by moment, breath by breath, with that sense of being enough, of having enough, of doing enough. There's a relaxation that comes, just relaxing into being. And a sense of being home. You know, sometimes we do very sort of granular guided meditations, meditations that follow the foundations of mindfulness or the loving kindness phrases, self-compassion, and so forth. Today we did one with some reflection, some contemplation. You know, it's really the most important thing is to spend this quiet time with ourselves, with oneself, more than whatever practice you've chosen to do. And of course, I'm not really suggesting we change the practice every single week. I do vary things, especially now that we're online for so long, being on Zoom. But it's also just to offer that sense of some freedom in sensing into what's right for you on any given day, and trusting that that's okay to do just that. You know, we're really, I think, looking at not just spring and renewal, but the light at the end of the COVID tunnel. And we don't know how long it's going to take, but we can see that light. We don't know because there are so many variants and so many variables with who's getting vaccine and being careful still, but yet spring has come. And Passover, the week of Passover is ending, and Passover too is celebration of freedom, of starting of new life, of escaping from oppression and all the things that hold us back. And I learned more about Holi, spelled H-O-L-I, which is a holiday celebrated in India and parts of Asia, and actually increasingly in Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of the world. And it's a Hindu holiday, but it's also a harvest spring holiday. And it has elements that remind me of Yom Kippur, elements of celebrating forgiveness, acknowledging the mistakes one has made in the year, and the difference that I see with Holi, that, well, I know Yom Kippur from being Jewish, that it's a festive day. It's a day to meet and laugh and play, and that the forgiveness, or meet with people you've had conflict with, and then you play. And the play that people do is they have water guns, and they color the water and squirt colored water at each other. They throw colored powder on each other the day after the ceremony that night. And it has cultural significance, particularly for Hindus on the Indian subcontinent. But the metaphorical meaning, this meaning of letting go of the past. I won't say getting rid, letting go of the past, and of then coloring our life with play, and with open-hearted meeting, and with celebration, and coloring the mind with the beautiful qualities where the mind can dwell. We call them Brahma Viharas, right? Brahma, divine, Vihar, dwelling place, love, compassion, joy, equanimity, gratitude, forgiveness, all of these beautiful qualities that we can color our minds with love, and with thoughts of, we would say, of the Dharma, of the divine. And the myth that, it's interesting because the myth that, I'm not going to go into the whole history of the myth of Holi, but just very briefly, the story goes that Krishna was, I guess, maybe poisoned. I don't know if it was at birth or as a youth, but anyway, Krishna has a very dark skin, dark blue skin. And he fell in love with Radha, and he was worried that she wouldn't like him because his skin was so dark. And this to me is so interesting. It's like colorism, the valuing of lighter over darker skin and grading skin color that way was alive and well that many thousands of years ago. So, we're seeing it today highlighted in the most brutal way, really, with George Floyd's trial, and the statements about how big, and how, he's big and he's black, right? He's dark. So Krishna was very worried that Radha wouldn't like him because of his color. And he talked to his mom about it. And his mom said, she was being just playful. She said, well, why don't you color Radha? And so they played, and Krishna smeared color on Radha's face, and they just had fun, and they fell in love. And of course, Krishna and Radha are central couple in the Hindu tradition. But I also like this. I like learning about Holi too, because for Yom Kippur, I'm Jewish, and Yom Kippur, there is literally a part where you kind of beat your breast and sing these songs and atone and repent. And I don't know about those of you who are Jewish, maybe I know the same is true of my Catholic friends, but there's been a thread of carrying guilt for my wrongdoings and shortcomings and various failures, all my life. And so this image of letting it go by playfulness and having fun with each other. And you're being a little aggressive, throwing powder or shooting people with water guns, but it's harmless. And and I find that there's a kind of trust in the possibility of returning to innocence and the freedom of the heart that we associate with spring, with Easter, with the renewal of this time of life. Pablo Neruda says, you can pick all the flowers, but you cannot stop the spring. And I feel that way about COVID. We've been through a year of COVID, but it could not stop the spring. Wherever you are in this country, you are seeing, even if it still feels like winter lockdown, you're seeing signs of spring. And one great meaning of these spring holidays is that change is possible. of all of these holidays, that the way things are now is not the way things will always be. And this is good news when you're, working from home and trying to force young kids to get on Zoom school. And it's good news to hear that things won't always be this way. If you've just fallen in love, maybe you'd like things to always be this way. It doesn't matter what we like. Things are going to change. And to sit together as we just did is a way of, that too is a way of renewing ourselves. Every time we take time to sit, we are renewing ourselves. We open up our limited identity of what we're going to do, what we did do, what we're planning to do. We open that all up to something bigger. Here you are again. Here I am, Trudy, again. When I was traveling on a pilgrimage to visit ancient Zen temples in China in 1985, right after China had opened up, one of the places that we visited was a temple called Dharma on the island of Putoshan, a whole island dedicated to compassion, to Kuan Yin. And the abbot of the temple there told us a story about how he had, during the Cultural Revolution, spent 20 years out in the countryside laboring with next to the peasants. And he said, but now he's back in the temple with his robes, and he showed us a calligraphy. In my memory, he actually pulled out his brush, from his big long monk sleeve, and moistened it with water on the ink stone and made this little calligraphy, which read, "Still the same old me." And I loved that because, sure, every time we sit, it's still the same old me, but it's also still, when we're still, we aren't bothered by that same old me. And when we make time to unplug, to relax, to begin anew in this way with each breath, when I do this, I realize, I'm not just Trudy. I'm my identity, just like yours. It just embraces life and it melts into something bigger. I become life in the form of me. You become life itself in the form of you and this world that we inhabit. And the little stream of this particular identity, who I think I am, what I think I'm supposed to be doing, all of that, that stream it flows into a vast sea, the big ocean, freed to flow all the way out to the horizon, the infinite sky. It's as though we're going past, the waves of this moment, the waves of pleasure, the waves of pain, the waves of sorrow, the waves of joy, the waves of connection, the waves of loneliness, all the waves of this ocean out to, that eternal horizon. That eternal horizon. So in this way, our mindfulness practice, our being attentive to each moment and, how we're keeping our minds in the moment and what we're doing in each moment, that by being mindful in this way, we're invited to really step outside of linear time into this being time that we experienced together this morning and right now too. And, whether we're sitting or walking or lying down, this mindfulness, it's with us. It can go anywhere. It can travel with us anytime. And, I'm looking out the window and I can see the breeze moving some branches. I can see the house next door. I'm back up north in the house that Jack rents in San Rafael. I can see the crabapple tree, the little crabapple tree across the way, and there's a few branches of it, the blossoms behind me. But since I picked those little branches on Wednesday, and today is Sunday. That tree is now all green leaves with just a few flowers on it. Just seeing that change. Yeah, in this moment, I am reborn, renewed, and you too, with whatever you're seeing. In the early days of InsightLA, Yvonne Rand, a Zen priest in the Soto tradition who passed away this year, in the early days of InsightLA, Yvonne came to visit and to teach with me. And I had sat in her Zendo up in Muir Beach many, many times. And what I loved in her Zendo, many things, but two of the things I loved in her Zendo were these calligraphies that she had on either side of the altar of where she had a beautiful Buddha. And they were calligraphies that were made by her teacher, Suzuki Roshi. And one of them said, "Never say too late." And the other one said, "It takes as long as it takes." You know, great inspiration for our practice, because, you know, the Dharma teaches us to begin again, and that, yeah, it's never too late to begin again. You know, and I tell some of my single women friends, you know, it isn't, I mean, I'm proof it's never too late, right? To begin again and have a happy marriage. I tried several times, and things can change. They really can change. I'm here to testify. And with these mindful steps, with opening our awareness to what's bigger than just, you know, my everyday preoccupations, by opening our awareness in this way, I do trust that we are opening to the redemption of our world. We are opening to the joys and sorrows and compassion. We feel compassion in our hearts, and compassion is not just empathy, you know, it's not just feeling the suffering with another. It's doing something about it. It's taking some action. It's taking some action to plant some new seeds, and just to trust, yeah, it takes as long as it takes. Elisa, in her beautiful talk last week, and again, I really do hope that if you weren't there, that you listened to it. Elisa quoted Sufi master Hazrat Nayat Khan and said, the quote was, "God breaks our hearts again and again and again until our hearts stay open." And then she substituted the word love. Love breaks our hearts again and again and again until our hearts stay open. And then she talked about that, about loss and pain, and how that, what is it Leonard Cohen said? It's the cracks of, anyway, if you remember the quote, put it in the chat. It's about how the light shines through the cracks in our hearts, something like that. And I'm going to talk more about that next week. But today, yeah, I really want to focus on the spring and the invitation to discover that we are so much more than what we think. And I talked before about Dick Schwartz, I think, and his internal family systems, his parts theory of just looking at the self in terms of all of these parts that we are, parts that we welcome, parts that we exile, parts he calls firefighter parts that come to the rescue of other parts. And it's a really, really beautiful modern psychological version of the teaching of anatta, of no self. And I think we posted his approach, his article on racism, which was really good. And maybe I'll post it again in the chat for those of you who weren't there. But it's also a way to step out of this kind of lonesome world of being encapsulated in our thoughts, in our thinking minds, it's a kind of isolation, really, and of loneliness. And I want to read you a poem that I think really belongs. For me, I always associate it with this season of renewal, of delicate baby leaves, of the bird songs coming back. Oh, thanks, Clark, for that quote. It's in the chat. And beginning anew. Sharon always talks in her teaching and her meditation guidance about beginning anew. And it's another way of saying what Suzuki Roshi said in the calligraphies in Ivan's Zendo. And we come here really to open our mind stream to something bigger than ourselves. I think there's always a longing in the human heart to belong to something bigger. That intuition that we come from a mystery, that we're headed day by day into the mysterious unknown, and that all the thoughts of who I am, who I was, who I could have been, who I could still be, who I might be, etc., that these are just like a shadow cast across our consciousness. So this is a poem about that I love. A poem about the shadow of thought. And it's written thousands of years ago by a Taoist master named Wu Xin. There is a shadow that runs parallel to life. The shadow is the thought, I am. The movement of life is therefore shadowed by the movement of thought. One must not forget that which runs parallel can never touch the living reality. Excuse me. I love that image, that which runs parallel can never touch the living reality, which is called life, right? This living reality is called life. And what does that mean? Is that a sentence to hopelessness or something about our practice? No, it's just a reminder that the thinking world that we live in so much of the time is not the most alive world, is not the world of bird songs and blossoms and crocuses poking up. And, it's not, it's not the world of this moment, feeling sensations in the body, the breath moving in the body, the brightness of consciousness, the possibility of loving awareness, any moment that we remember to be present. This is what he's calling the reality of life. And then all our thoughts about that, all our thoughts about what's happening, what might happen, what did happen, what we wish would happen, they run parallel. They don't touch. And the teaching of that is not to make the mistake of just imagining that thinking about stuff is going to bring us super close and intimate connection with whatever it is that we may be thinking about. And I'm not just talking about rumination. And I think the good news of the Dharma and of this poem is that we don't have to be looking at life from a distance. We don't have to be sort of peering. I used to walk, when I was young, I've always liked walking around at night. And in the winter, when it would get dark early, as a woman, it's not safe to walk around late at night, sad to say. I would walk around where I lived in Cambridge and look at the lighted windows, the glow of people's lives inside those houses. And often I would imagine that inside those glowing windows, that people were having the warm, loving, enough, perfect life that I was not having at that time. It was a hard time in my life as a working single mom. And Yeah, I know. When did I even have time to walk around and look? I was probably pushing a stroller. Anyway, there was that sense of peering from a distance at something warm and good. Now, later, when I became a psychotherapist, I really learned that, nobody's life is perfect. And that was, that was an illusion. But this sense of knowing that our thinking is parallel to the living reality, it's like that, the difference is we can jump into the warmth and brightness of this awareness at any moment. We don't have to peer at it from the outside or imagine, oh, that's something that she has because she's been meditating for, 45, 50 years. I don't have it. You don't have to meditate for 45 or 50 years. You can drop in, you can touch and taste this right now with whatever you're seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, feeling, thinking. These are the contents of your awakening, the contents of this moment. That's it. So, the invitation today is to remember that we can rise up into the fullness of who we are, that we can plant seeds and water them with our loving awareness, that we can trust the truth that we are enough. And about that, I just want to say a few words before closing this talk, because, when we can trust, like find those moments, whether it's in sitting or daily life, those moments of confidence or peacefulness or pleasure in just being wherever we are, whoever we are, however we are. When we find those moments, then we feel the world come closer somehow, or we come closer to the world. It's like a kind of magical or mysterious encounter where it feels like the world actually comes closer and becomes more vivid and real. And it just takes that little bit of effort to shift the attention from the to-do list, or to put, years ago, somebody gave me a to-do list that said in beautiful calligraphy on top, to-do list. And then it said, inhale, exhale, next line, inhale, exhale, next line, right? You got it, the whole to-do list. So rather than having to do more, can we just see more and prioritize whatever it is that just lovingly gentles our life a little bit? And that, when we find these moments of trust, to appreciate them and to feel, I don't know, maybe build a little mental altar to them, offer some incense or a flower, whatever you love, and trust that we don't have to pull the flower buds open, that they will open in the warming light of these lengthening days. And in the same way, when we open our hearts and practice the kind of presence that we do here together, that when we do that, we too flower in the light of the Dharma, in the light of loving awareness. So I want to just close this talk by asking you to reflect for a moment on what it is that wants to grow in you. What seeds are you wanting to plant? Or maybe you've already planted them and they just need some water. But to just take a moment and reflect on that, and just seeing what wants to be attended to or to be born in your life. And what does this look like? And what does it feel like? Okay, so now it's your turn. If you'd like to offer a reflection, I don't call it Q&A, and I've said this every week, I don't have the answers. It's Q&R, questions and reflections or responses to what's been said, but it doesn't have to be about anything that's been said. It can be whatever's coming up in your practice. And you can go into the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and just click on the raise hand. And then Alex will call on you and you can unmute yourself and we can talk. And if you're still reflecting, yeah, take your time. You know, I've noticed the last couple times that I've spoken here that nobody's raised their hand or wanted to talk. And then I thought, well, should I take this personally? There's nothing, they've got nothing to say. You know that expression, you can't say something nice, don't say anything. And then I just thought, I don't know. Oh, good. Clark, thank you.
No, don't take offense, Trudy. We're all wandering in our minds and spacing out. I just didn't know if I wanted to. I don't have a coherent, clear thing in response, but when you were describing these experiences of sometimes emptying enough to be able to see new things, slowing down enough to see new things. I was just in the desert for 3 days in Joshua Tree, and I've been going to the desert for probably 25 years. I always go several times a year. And I just started to think like, why? What do I enjoy about going to the desert? What's the point? And particularly with COVID, I realized when I was there just days ago, I literally just wander off into the desert. I don't know how long I'm going. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm going to see. And it's a wonderful experience every time I do it. And leaving it open like that, I think is one of the few places in our cultural world where I get to turn off all the switches and I just go, let's see what happens. And I was there with my 17-year-old son and our dog. And it became quickly that the dog went nuts chasing these jackalopes, these big rabbits that are out there. And it was comical and hysterical. And we spent 2 hours just chasing the dog and trying to get control of him. And it was bizarre and funny. But it's the unknown and it's unpredictable. And there's plenty of empty space there too. So I think that's what the attraction was for the desert for me. So
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a reason why people were always wandering in the desert, you know, in those old Bible stories and things. The desert, we're lucky to have the desert nearby in LA because it is so open and spacious. And when I first moved here, I thought, why does everyone love the desert? It's bleak. The desert out here is bleak. And yeah, now I love it too, for just the reasons you're saying. I'm so glad you get to do that, and especially with your son. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think Sherry, am I saying your name correctly? I think you're next.
Hi, Trudy. I will tell you a couple weeks ago when there was a lot of silence after your talk. You were talking about the hate crimes that have been going on, and at that time I was feeling like it was really important to um, make sure that whoever wanted to speak that related to that, other than a white female. So that was a response for why it was so quiet. I don't know if other people had those thoughts, but
Thank you. That's so respectful. Thank you. And it really,
yeah,
it gave room for the Asian women to speak,
yeah,
or women of Asian descent, Asian American.
yes. So I wanted to tell you that it wasn't personal, but also I've been reflecting on. I think it's been just about a year and a few months since I've been attending regularly to this sitting group. And I just feel over the time that sort of softening of my heart more than a breaking of my heart. But um, I started to have, for one thing, some changes in my feelings towards my mother who died. And we had a difficult relationship, and I always had been holding so much guilt and resentment and just a lot of dark feelings and hardness in my heart. And little by little over this year, I've been noticing that my relationship with her is changing, and that I'm more able to allow the more painful feelings underneath, but also like to see the beauty in her that was um, so not there at the end of her life, especially. And I was thinking how, like, talking about renewal today, also, um, that it isn't ever too late. Like, I still am having a better relationship with her now, even though she's not here anymore. And I found a few little items of hers yesterday, and um, I just saw the softer, sweeter side of her, and it was really beautiful. So
Like just when you said, I found these few items of hers, you got this very nice smile on your face, like a loving smile.
yeah,
I'm happy to hear you say this for your own happiness, but also because it points to how, sure, somebody leaves their body, they're not in our life anymore,
mhm,
but they're alive in us still. And the relationship is ongoing and it can be healed. And yeah, whatever our belief systems might be about what happens after death, it can be healed. So thank you.
mm, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Bruce?
Hi, Trudy.
Hi, Bruce.
It's so much easier not to do this. This is the first time I've gotten up the gumption to raise my hand.
Well, congratulations. You don't have to do anything else. You already did a brave thing.
I actually can't believe I did it anyway.
You did.
Yeah.
We're all the witness. You did a brave thing.
I was thinking about the first book I ever bought about Buddhism was ages ago, and it was a very complex book by Dr. Mark Epstein called Thoughts Without a Thinker. Believe it or not, that's how I started with Buddhism. And
That's not a bad start.
and then along those lines of trying to think, of thinking but not thinking, I remember you said one time, and I have vivid memory of, and I didn't follow up because I thought, well, the answer should be obvious, I guess, that when you said, in a sense we have a self, but in another sense we don't. and I was interested to, explore, I think, more along the lines of what the self that we have is. And then you, of course, explained a lot about it in your talk today. So that was cool. But I think in the process of rising above what our everyday lives are and that sort of thing that you were talking about, and that we actually discover what the sense that we have, the self that we have is. And you talk about that process of rising above the everyday. And I'm going to see my mother on Easter today, and I think my mother is is really kind of sad, because it often seems that she has almost never risen above that kind of thing. It's like she's so paranoid and anxious and Mormon, and so I have to just be with it, and I at the same time I feel like I want to find a way to help her rise above it, as I do myself.
So, oh, can I say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go on. Yes.
I want to say something, which is, well, two things actually. The first thing is, I just had this image when you were saying you wanted to help her rise above it. I pictured the people in India like squirting each other with squirt guns and throwing powder on each other. And I thought, is there something fun you could do with your mom? Just forget about, teaching her anything, or is there just something fun you could do together that she would enjoy, even if it's just watching something, I don't know what her, capacities are, but just focusing more on the playful aspect, because when people are laughing, they're not anxious. They're just not, that's like the one time you are not anxious, even if you're anxious all the rest of the time. And the other thing is about the rising above. I want to make it clear, I'm not really talking about transcending our everyday life, because it's actually in the midst of our mindful experience of just what's happening now. The rising above is sort of I just used it as an Easter image, because actually I think of it more really of entering into, like we're really fully immersing ourselves, and then things transform, and the everyday stuff that might have just looked really, I don't know, you wouldn't even notice it, become beautiful. You can, God, what did I slice the other day? And it had such a beautiful inside. I don't know if it was a kiwi fruit or, I remember just slicing something, and it was this gorgeous mandala of seeds. And anyway, you understand what I'm saying. I just don't want to be misleading, like we're supposed to transcend, because I think immanence is really where it's at.
Well,
and you're seeing your mom later. What could you do with her that might just be pleasurable?
well, of course, Easter's, we're planning to do something pleasurable. Yeah, go out to dinner.
Yeah, you'll eat some good food and maybe watch something silly.
Yeah, she has a hard time being silly, but whatever.
Watch other people be silly. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying, because I don't know about you, but I always wished I could like teach my family the things, share with them what I had learned through my Dharma practice. And I think Jack tells this story. It stayed with me my whole life. I heard it when I was, in my 20s, but about this young woman who goes home and she's been doing meditation and she's all fired up about Buddhism. And then she writes to her teacher and says, I'm visiting my family, and they hate me when I talk about Buddhism, but they love me when I'm a Buddha. So do you see what I mean? I don't think you're necessarily trying to teach your family. I was young and I thought I could. They weren't interested at all, but they definitely noticed when I was having experiences like Sherry described, being softer, a little more loving, expressing that. Yes. So hopefully there's more to think about that, or to reflect on rather, and not any answers to your question, because through your own reflection and practice, that's where you're going to learn the most.
One thing speaking of this Mark Epstein thing, the Buddhist psychology, I would like to hear a lecture or a Dharma talk from you about what that's all about. But one thing that floats through my mind when I'm thinking about it is I studied a lot of Zen, and in the Zen sanghas that I was going to, they would almost every week they would talk about how we're in a story. We create our stories and we're always inhabiting. And to me, that seems like when you're trying to realize what the story is, you're trying to do what you just said you shouldn't do. And that is to sort of rise above it. You're supposed to see come from outside it and look in. And that's sort of what mindfulness seems to tell me to do also. So I'm trying to tread that middle ground between those things.
Yeah, it's confusing. And this is what the mind does actually when we think about things. It gets us confused. You know, my first teacher, the Korean Zen master, he used to say, don't attach to my words, because sometimes he would say it's all a story. Other times he might say, enter the story or create a beautiful story. And then people would say, hey, but you said, and he said, he had this expression, he'd say, yeah, the dog runs after the bone. If you like attach to what he said and then caught him in contradictions, and because really, Bruce, the only thing is that really matters is the awareness. And so when people are talking about stories, they're really talking about being so caught inside however we're like, okay, let's tell the story that I told myself. Oh, they're not talking after I speak. They talked a lot after Melissa spoke. I watched the YouTube. They talked a lot after Elisa. Do you see what I mean? Like I could make a story. They didn't like what I said. It'll always usually be an undermining story. It's never usually a great story unless you have a very strong ego. And most women are not socialized to that, although they can develop it. And that's a good thing to have, a strong sense of self. But the confidence and the trust in that strong sense of self is actually what allows us to let go and surrender it to something that is not so much a story, but just the lived reality of this moment. You've heard that in those Zen talks. So I think if you can just get really simple in your practice, Bruce, just what are you seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, just stay very simple, grounded in your sensory awareness, that will help you stay present. And then your own don't know mind, your own creativity will answer these questions, and it will. And just a really quick story. I was at a Zen retreat called a sesshin once with a Zen master named Sasaki Roshi, who's actually the teacher of Joshi's father. And I guess we'd been sitting for 3 days. So it was sort of in the middle of the retreat. And I came in for a meeting with the teacher and I asked a question. And he looked at me with total contempt, like his lip curled up. And he said, "You're still thinking?" It was great. It was a moment, because of course I've had many other moments with him. That wasn't our only exchange. But so that's my encouragement to you. Get really concrete in your practice this week and see what happens. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Joshi, because I haven't seen you for like, I don't know, 20, 30 years.
Hi, Trudy.
Hi, so happy to see you again.
It's so sweet to pop in here. I mean, this is a COVID silver lining.
Yeah, exactly.
It's wonderful to see you. I think I saw you last, maybe at Sasaki's memorial or funeral or
Probably.
anyway. But your story of Passover just brought to mind you know, what it was like growing up with a monk for a dad. And I'm sure your kids have stories, but a classic Passover story was when I was 13 or 12, my father's house burned down like to the ground
I remember.
on Easter and Passover, full moon.
I forgot that it happened on Passover.
Yeah, and it was at night and it was late.
They were out.
They'd been out, and then we got a phone call from my dad, like, well, we have a house fire. And so my mother took us over to the house, and I'm like, we're losing everything, crying. And my father walks down the driveway and he starts laughing and was, you know, did you bring any marshmallows? We have a good fire. And there was no water to put out the fire for the fire trucks. They were live out in the country, so it just meant everything was gone. And fortunately, everybody was out of the house, so there was no matter of safety. But that kind of detachment, or I don't know how to describe it because it's so familiar, and I don't know what's my dad and what's Buddhism or what's his Zen practice. They're so
merged. They're so merged in him.
Yeah, but I've seen that response so repetitively, that the idea that, you know, and I see it in other monks as well, but that this flowering takes place over decades. And, you know, I certainly don't have that kind of a rigor or dedication in my practice, but I hope that I can, at least I've seen what these can look like. And so in the face of losing all your worldly possessions, or having kidney failure, or these other kinds of traumatic events by any measure, need not be traumatizing.
Exactly. That's so beautifully said. Exactly. And your dad is really kind of a towering example of that, actually. He really is. And Marcia too. I remember when all her videos of her dancing burned up. You know, that was the thing that was hardest for her. And also just, you know, we're women. And so our way of practice and holding the practice is different and going to be different. And that's important too. I'm just really happy that you're here and happy to see you again. And thank you for speaking. Mwah. I don't think we have time, Stephanie. Will you ask next week, please? And I think Rick had his hand up. I hope you'll come back next week because, yeah, our time is up. And I think that, Alex, you always want to make a couple of announcements. Is that true?
That's true. And I just want to thank you for your humanness and honesty about when no one was starting to ask questions, especially as a new teacher. That always pops into my head right away. So just made me realize, oh, we're all the same, especially with the stories. So thank you.
Especially with the stories, exactly.
So I want to thank you, Trudy, for your talk and sit today. And thank you everyone for joining. So I have just a few announcements to close. So this Tuesday, April 6th, from 6 to 8:30 Pacific time, the MPEAK, the Mindful Performance Enhancement Awareness and Knowledge course begins. And next Sunday from 10 to 1 p.m., there's a half-day retreat dedicated to the Dharma, the path of friendship. Both events are posted in the chat. You can find these events and all of InsightLA's offerings on their website. And if you're interested in the optional breakout rooms today, I will open them at 12:40 to discuss today's topic, anything you want to remember. So just make sure you're back and I'll put everyone into breakout rooms. And before I hand the mic back to Trudy, I just wanted to quickly bring up the practice of Dharma. And Dharma is the word for generosity and is truly such an important part of this path to happiness, freedom, awakening. and it helps us to cultivate and deepen our compassion and awareness. And I know I said this a couple of weeks ago, but I just wanted to close with this quote from the Buddha, that generosity brings happiness at every stage of its expression. We experience joy in forming the intention to be generous. We experience joy in the actual act of giving something. And we experience joy in remembering the fact that we have given. So InsightLA has many Dharma-based classes, including this Sunday offering. And this is because of the generosity of the teachers sharing this ancient wisdom with us, and as well as the generosity of the Sangha through donation and time volunteering. I've also included a link in the chat box with different ways of giving and being generous. So thank you.
Alex, is this really, I just want to check, I thought people had to pay to register for this group. Not necessarily?
I am not sure. I thought it was, and I could be wrong. I apologize.
Well, I think what it is, what I'm hoping it is that, you know, you can offer something to register, but you don't have to. That's what I'm hoping. And if anybody knows, you can put that in the chat and tell me, and I'll find out.
I got that wrong.
No, we'll find out. We should just be sure. You're probably right, because yeah, you're probably right. And I just want to encourage people who want to get to know each other a little bit more than just staring at, you know, tiles on the screen, to join a breakout group. Zoom arranges them randomly. So don't worry, there's no hot sociometric issue over, you know, am I going to choose Hiroki or Bob or Meredith, or, you know, it's not like that. You're just put in a little group and you have a chance to get to know each other. And there's a 10-minute break for, if you're in this time zone, to get some lunch or whatever, and bio break, and then come back together. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Great to see you all again. You can unmute, say hi, goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Hi,
Bye, thank you.
Thank
thank
you.
you. Lovely share. Thank you, Trudy. It's not
Thank-
personal on my part. It's usually self-judgment.
Nice to see you, Meredith.
Thank you.
You too, Ethy. Hi. Yeah, happy to see you all.
Happy Easter.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.